Bhavati Naishtagi Krishne Swadhamopavate Dharmapyanadibhisaha Kalavana Shrudrashamesha Puranarko Dhunotitaha. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th Canto, Chapter 3, and we are just going to summarize text number 1, which we discussed a week or two ago, and then we can have questions. So I will just repeat the verse and purport, and I'll go through the main points that we covered before, then we can open it up for questions. Shri Badarayana Uvacha Evam Yavasito Buddhya Samadhaya Manohridi Jajapa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanyanushikshitam. That means, Shukdev Goswami continued, thereafter the king of the elephants, Gajendra, fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence and chanted a mantra which he had learned in his previous birth as Indradyumna, and which he remembered by the grace of Krishna. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Such remembrance is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text 43 and 44. Tatratam buddhi sanyogam labhate parvatehikam yadate tato bhuyah samsiddhao gurunandana purvabhyasena tenaiva kriyate yavashopisaha. In these verses, it is assured that even if a person engaged in devotional service falls down, he's not degraded, but is placed in a position in which he will, in due course of time, remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained later, Gajendra was formerly King Indradyumna, and somehow or other, in his next life, he became king of the elephants. Now, Gajendra was in danger, and although he was in a body other than that of a human being, he remembered the stotra he had chanted in his previous life. Yatate chatato bhuyaha samsiddhau gurunandana. To enable one to achieve perfection, Krishna gives one the chance to remember him again. This is proved here, for although the king of the elephants, Gajendra, was put in danger, this was a chance for him to remember his previous devotional activities so that he could immediately be rescued by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is imperative, therefore, that all devotees in Krishna consciousness practice chanting some mantra. Certainly, one should chant the Hare Krishna mantra, which is the Maha Mantra or Great Mantra. And also, one should practice chanting Chintamani Prakara Satmasu or the Nrasingha Stotra, Ito Nrasingha Parato Nrasingho, Yato Yato Yami Tato Nrasingha. Every devotee should practice in order to chant some mantra perfectly, so that even though he may be imperfect in spiritual consciousness in this life, in his next life he will not forget Krishna consciousness, even if he becomes an animal. Of course, a devotee should try to perfect his Krishna consciousness in this life, for simply by understanding Krishna and his instructions, after giving up this body, one can return home, back to Godhead. Even if there is some fall down, practice of Krishna consciousness never goes in vain. For example, Ajamila, in his boyhood, practiced chanting the name Narayana under the direction of his father, but later, in his youth, he fell down and became a drunkard, woman hunter, rogue, and thief. Nonetheless, because of chanting the name of Narayana for the purpose of calling his son, whom he had named Narayan, he became advanced, even though he was involved in sinful activities. Therefore, we should not forget the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra under any circumstances. It will help us in the greatest danger, as we find in the life of Gajendra. Om Jnanatimarantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukunda Karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yet kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodatao Gaudodai Pushpavantao Chittao Shandao Tamonadao Taptanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Madkavirapi Gopala Sri Kuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadevasam Payah Pitwa Krishye Yustat Priyajanaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We discussed before that the word japya means some hymn or stotra to be chanted. And here the words Prag Janmani refer to when Gajendra was known as King Indrajumna. He was a king before. He was the king of Tamil Nadu. And now he's still a king, but he's a king in the heavenly planets. Unfortunately, he's not a human king. Neither is he exactly a demigod. He's an elephant. So strange are the ways of fate. And anything can happen. As Srila Prabhupada has reminded us in his purport, even if we're devotees, somehow or other we may find ourselves in that condition. So strange are the ways of fate. So in any case, in any condition, we should always remember chanting the holy name. Jiva Goswami says that it should be understood from Sridhar Swami's commentary on text 2, that although it wasn't physically possible for him to utter the mantra from his previous birth, because after all, he was an elephant, by dint of trying, somehow it came out and the Lord responded properly. So here, thus resolute, evam vyavasitam, these words, Jiva Goswami says, refers to having firm conviction. Actually, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. Firm conviction, nishchaya, to be doubtless. A very, very important point. Now, Srila Prabhupada is quoted from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, text 43 and 44, and he's clearly taken his cue to do so from the commentary of Viragavacharya. Viragavacharya is in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. So Viragavacharya had written that in this verse, the sage Badarayani says that Gajendra chanted that stotra from his previous birth, fixing his mind, his resolve, like the type mentioned by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 43, text 44, 643, 44. Likewise, he chanted the supreme stotra, worth chanting as instructed, and practiced during his previous birth, known as Indrajumna. He withdrew his mind from other external things, having a fixed mind, vyavasita, meaning concentrated within the heart, in the manner depicted in the pair of verses beginning Namami, which we don't have time to discuss now. So many different commentaries here. Jayadwaj Tirtha, the Madhva Sampradaya, he says that in this chapter, the type of liberation is determined to show that Gajendra's liberation from the calamity of the crocodile's grasp would occur through the mercy of Bhagavan Hari, as a result of being praised and pleased through Gajendra's attentive glorification. In what way did Gajendra attain shelter? To show that, he spoke this verse. He fixed his mind, he chanted the japa. So, Apadam sritim ghoram in nama vivasho grinan tata sadyo vimuchetu yat vibheti swayam bhayam. Living entities who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. And Gajendra, when he realized that there was nothing he could do, there was certainly nothing his wives could do, there was nothing his friends could do, he was without any shelter. He was helpless. Then he abandoned all other, well, we say, varieties of dharma, and he took shelter of Krishna. He called out to the Lord, Govinda, Damodar, Madhava, or as Bhagavatam says, Narayana Akhila Guru Bhagavan Namaste. So back in Srimad Bhagavatam, we've also heard that the leader of the elephants, whose leg was attacked in a river by the crocodile of superior strength, was much aggrieved. Taking a lotus flower in his trunk, he addressed the Lord, saying, O original enjoyer, Lord of the universe, O deliverer, famous as the place of pilgrimage, everyone is purified simply by hearing your holy name, which is worthy to be chanted. And Srila Prabhupada gives us a wonderful purport there. Second canto, chapter 7, text 15 and 16. Take some time to look at that. It's very helpful. Okay, so regarding the Bhagavad Gita excerpt that Srila Prabhupada quotes, there are two classes of yogis who fail. We've heard from different acharyas in their commentaries. One is the person who falls after just beginning Krishna consciousness, and another one is the person who falls after having practiced for some time. And here it's stated that those who fail after a long time, they're taking birth in the Shuchinam Gehe, in the family of pure souls, Brahmins. And those who fail after a short time, they take birth in wealthy families, Srimatam Gehe. There's an interesting little fact to consider there. Now, none of the acharyas, as far as I've seen, have commented on the subtle vehicle of one's transmigration to different bodies, which is samskara. But it's very strongly implied here that it is the samskar created by Gajendra's previous practice, Indradyumna's practice of chanting mantras and worshiping the Lord, that has allowed him to somehow remember, even as an animal in heaven, that he has to take shelter of Krishna through chanting his holy names. So that's a very interesting topic that we don't really have time to dilate on now, unless someone has questions. But the idea is that the nature and intensity of one's association, the perceptions that association creates, the volitional effort that one makes, whether it's material or spiritual, these ultimately direct one's trajectory in life towards one's next position, maybe through or beyond the cycle of birth and death. It does so by shaping one's innate mindset, or his psychology, if you will. That's called swabhava. His disposition, his habits, desires, the assumptions that we make, presuppositions or expectations that we bring into any situation, our subconscious sense of self-worth, all these things are the manifestations of samskara. Samskarana, when we see inside the books are printed, prathama samskarana, dvitiya samskarana, it means an imprint. Every association that we take, every activity that we perform, everything we see, hear, do, think, feel, speak, etc., they all leave a calling card on our mind. And that the sum total of all that association, sangha, samyak gachati iti sangha. Sangha means all this stuff goes together. So this is the process, this is the agent, if you will, of our transmigration through the cycle of repeated birth and death. And it can be driven by our own free will. This is the point, the important point. We're not just trapped and forced to do things as a result of our association. We can make choices, but those choices are going to be heavily conditioned, of course, by our experiences, associations, our karma, etc. All right, so these are some of the things that have been stated here. One very important point that we emphasized last time is something that I think it was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on text number 45. Evam yoga prankshe karanam yatna shaitilyam eva. That means that the cause of one's fall down from Krishna consciousness or from yoga practice is simply lack of effort, laziness. Yatna shaitilyam. Shitila means to be laxity of effort. And then he refers to the other verse, ayati shraddhayopeta, in this regard. So that's a very important thing to consider, because some of the words here are significant also. We heard vyavasa, or vyavaso, to resolve, to decide, to ascertain, to determine, to be willing, to be convinced of, to make a strenuous effort, to make up one's mind, to labor or endeavor hard for. This is what it means to have vyavasita mindset, because the word is used here, vyavasita. And of course, it's the same word we find in Bhagavad Gita chapter 241, vyavasayatmika buddhi. And that is very, very important. As Srila Prabhupada understood from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport on that verse, one must focus his mind and obedience on the order of the spiritual master, because Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila chapter 12 text 10 tells us this is the active principle in spiritual life. As soon as someone disobeys or neglects the order of the spiritual master, immediately he's useless, asara. So Prabhupada also writes in the purport, Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 14, text 29. Actually, any activities performed favorably for the satisfaction of the Lord under the direction of the spiritual master are spiritual. But for a person to disregard the order of the spiritual master and act by concoction, accepting his nonsensical activities to be spiritual, that is Maya. Very strong statements he says here. And we know also from Chaitanya Charitamrita elsewhere, Bahu janma kari jadi shravan kirtan, tabutana pai Krishna pade premadhan. No one who is infested with these 10 offenses against chanting the holy name, such as neglect of the order of the spiritual master, can gain the pure holy name, even if he's chanting for many births, even if he's chanting as an elephant in his next life. If the offenses are there, the Krishna prema will not happen. So this is very, very important subject. We see in the Bhagavatam not only failures, we see success stories, both. So we have an example of both here in this Gajendra Upakyan, just like Ajamila. He failed in the beginning, but he got success later on. This should be encouraging to us, that no matter what happens, we should carry on with our chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra especially. And Prabhupada emphasizes some other mantras as well. Brahma Samhita, he said, we should enter into as a regular daily function. Or Vishnu Sahasranama, it's very popular. It's very purifies our mindset, because out of nowhere, all of a sudden we may think, Suvarna Varna Hemango, ityadi. So this is all the process of purifying our samskaras through the bhakti process. But ultimately it has to come from divine grace. And we see here, Gajendra was hopeless and he was losing until he received the divine grace of the Lord by his sincere endeavor to chant the holy name. So do not let anyone ever tell you that anything is more important than chanting your 16 rounds every day of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada said of all the orders of the spiritual master, this one is the most important. Okay, I'm going to stop here, but hopefully some have questions prepared and we can discuss those.
Thank you. After you spoke last time, Bhagavad Gita 6.27, and definitely I went and referred to the commentary of the previous point. Very nice. What's going to be the impact in the last speech? I have one question for you. What dampens learning and how to persistently maintain the learning and expand on it?
I can't hear anything, so I don't know if anyone has asked a question or not. Let me try and put on some headphones, that might help.
I can repeat it.
Can I repeat?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I was saying, how can we have persistent laulyam in spiritual life, and how can that laulyam be expanded more and more?
How to have consistent and expanding greed for advancing further in Krishna consciousness. Well, of course, the general answer always to questions of this nature is that we have to associate with those who have what we want. That's true in any world. And certainly it's also true in Krishna consciousness. But the material world is so arranged by the Lord that it is full of miseries and reverses and difficulties and other things that help to inspire us to get out of this unnatural and unpleasant environment. Dukkalayam shashvatam. Krishna says one should have a sense of the evil of repeated birth, death, old age, disease, etc. So all of us are in our own situation. Everybody's different. And certain things get one person and don't bother another person's. So Krishna is very able, he's very expert to arrange circumstances that help us. One person may need to lose all of his money. Another person may need to lose his eyesight, or another person may need to lose all of his friends or political support. So all of us are attached in so many ways, and that's what Krishna pokes at out of his causeless mercy. We should recognize it as such. Yasyaham anugrahnami harishe tadhanam shanai. Krishna says, with regards to taking away money, but anything really, Krishna can do that. I remember many years ago, I had opportunity to visit hospitals over an extended period. And I was really impressed to see the condition of various conditions of the patients in those hospitals. That somebody's having a heart attack, somebody has lost his mind, somebody cannot control his bowels. You know, anything can happen. And it's very inspiring to consider that what is the guarantee that I'm not next tomorrow or maybe today in the afternoon? We don't know. Sometimes you can be killed. Rahu and Ketu, when they're administering your karma, they may do anything, including killing you. Saturn is usually a little bit more lenient, but he makes it very hard. You've got to work hard. So in this way, we have demigods who are all working under Maya, Maya Dhakshena Prakatihi, ityadi, and they are helping the Lord, helping Maya to just somehow bring us around. if we appreciate that this is coming from Krishna, if we are pious, if we have cultivated the samskaras of bhakti, as Gajendra did, and Prabhupada writes about this in his purport, then when we are hit by Maya hard, then we can take shelter. We have a greater inclination to do that. When we're impious, then it's hard. When we get smashed, then we reject God. We criticize or we blame others for what is really just our own. We got ourselves into this mess. So suffering, this is the point. Sometimes suffering is a good inspiration for Krishna consciousness. But the better path, the easier path, certainly, much easier, is to associate with more advanced devotees voluntarily and try to emulate them, get their blessings, serve them, please them. Then by that grace, we will automatically advance. I hope that is okay. Answer.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. It was very, very valuable pointers you gave us. Thank you. Anybody else would like to ask? The online question.
Hare Krishna, can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah. Dandavats Prabhuji, thank you for your wonderful class. This question is related to something that I heard from you in the last class 2 weeks back when you gave. You had briefly in one of the questions spoken about Indra's, in the pastime, in the context of Vritrasur, killing Vritrasur. So I had a question from that section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We see that, after Indra killed Vritrasur, he was affected by that sinful reaction and he had to run and finally he hid in a lake and so on. And the texts and even Prabhupada's purports generally mention that the sinful reaction Indra got was a reaction to the offense of killing Vritrasur. My question was, why was that an offense? Because if you see the story, when I went through the story, it seems that, Vritrasur was the one who, attacked Indra and eventually, so Indra had to fight back. And in the course of that, of course, Vritrasur died. But in one sense, it was an act of self-defense. So I could not understand what was the offense committed by Indra due to which he was being afflicted by that sinful reaction and he had to run around. And ultimately, he took shelter, I think, of Mahalakshmi in a stem of a lotus. And in that way, he got freed from that reaction. So what was Indra's offense? That is my question.
Well, it's kind of like in 2020, those of us who are not very careful to wear our masks properly, including over your nose, we may unknowingly infect others. Unknowingly. We don't really know that we have coronavirus or not. None of us know, unless we've been tested a minute ago. So we don't want to take the risk of killing devotees. And that was Indra's problem. Vritrasura was a devotee. Although technically he may have looked like a demon, but he was a pure Vaishnava. He was ready to go. He was eager to go back to Godhead, challenging Indra. Send me back to Godhead. I'm good with that. So this is the problem with Indra. Although it's true, it was self-defense. And by some stretch, you can consider Vritrasura to be an atatai, an attacker, who is, according to Dharma Shastra, he's allowed to be killed. But he was a devotee. That's my understanding. I can't say that it's based on any explicit reference, but this is my feeling. Never a good idea to kill devotees. So wear your mask. Is that okay?
We have some few questions which came on the chat. Sometimes it is quoted from Shastra that Diksha removes all karma. So after Diksha, whatever reversals are because of aparadha. But as you quoted, reversal could be because of Krishna's arrangement apart from aparad. Can you please give reference again? This is from the last class.
Yes, I think I mentioned, maybe, that in the 5th canto regarding Priyavrata Maharaj, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out why even devotees have to undergo suffering. And he says one reason is that it's their karma, and we just have to wear it out gradually. Another reason is that the usual reason, in fact, we've committed offenses. That is very, very common. It is expected, it is usual when we're neophyte in devotional service, we're going to commit offenses. And that's why we don't have an immediate taste for the holy name. And offenses cause that kind of reverse, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. A third possibility is the most scary one. And there he says that it may just be that Krishna wants you to die or undergo some difficulty for his own inscrutable purposes. That's also there. So, as far as we're concerned, we should assume that if we have to undergo difficulties, it's because of our offenses, because that is the interpretation of the situation that allows one to advance very rapidly. If we're anxious about our inadequacies and shortcomings, and we make an endeavor to advance, that draws Krishna's attention, and he will reciprocate with us. I don't know if that's exactly answering your question.
The next question we received on the chat is Hare Krishna Prabhuji Dandat Pranam. Thank you for taking this beautiful verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 8th canto about glories of chanting various mantras and how they create samskaras in our life. You also mentioned that we have our free will to make our choices and not that we are trapped by Maya. Most of the time we fall down is because of our laziness and lack of effort. How do develop this willpower to make right choices?
Yeah, that's kind of similar to the first question. Again and again, with practically any question you ask about how to make advancement, the answer is always one. You seek that good association, the association of those who are like you, that sajatiya, Rupa Goswami calls it. And they're also they're also inclined to give you mercy. Snigdha, they're friendly. And it has to be persons who are more advanced. Because if you find somebody who is like you, with whom you can relate, that's very comfortable. It's natural. It's easy. But unless that person is more advanced, what can he really do for you? On the other hand, if you have more advanced association, but the person is so different that you can't even begin to relate, then where's the scope for exchange? It's also difficult. So sajati ashaya snigdha, swatovare, sadhu sangha swatovare. The sadhu must be more advanced than you are. More advanced means his faith is deeper than yours. Same kind of faith, but deeper than yours. It's a question of degree, not quality. So this is the advice. We always seek the association of more advanced devotees who are affectionate and similar to us, but deeper in their faith than we are. If we strive for that association, tad eva sadhyatam, Narad Muni says in his Bhakti Sutras twice. He repeats it. Strive for that only. Strive for that only. It's pretty emphatic. So that is always the ready answer for questions of this nature, how to make advancement. I hope it's helpful.
We have next question. If material samskars are very deep, then I find that it is little difficult to create good impressions of spiritual practices. How to intensify spiritual samskars?
Well, that's a very good question. And we have a very easy, simple answer for that. Bhakti is such a process, so powerful, that automatically it's like the express lane. It's like the elevator, as opposed to taking the stairs to the top of a high building. So, Kirato hunandhra pulinda pulkasha abhira shumbha yavana khasadaya yanye chapapa yadapashraya shuddhyanti tasmai prabhavishnave nama. Even a sinful person who takes to Krishna consciousness will be elevated because it's just that powerful. And you cannot compare it to any other means of purification. Yajna dana tapaschaiva pavanani manishinaha. Krishna tells Arjuna twice in Bhagavad Gita. Sacrifice, charity, austerity. These three things should never be given up. And if we look throughout all the processes that are taught and encouraged in the Vedas, we will find the common denominator is that they are infused with these three things. That's how they purify one. And some things do this better, and some things do it less better. So planting trees is a very good thing, especially in countries like India, where the trees are very less. Maharashtra, it's not so visible, but in UP, hard to find trees nowadays, especially what do they call it? Desertification. And of course, we know that the trees on which we all depend in the Amazon basin, for example, they're being burned down, cut also. So it's a great idea. It helps everybody when we plant trees. And that also purifies our heart because it's a selfless activity. But it's karma. And it's temporary. And sooner or later, things are just going to come back to where we are now. But in devotional service, we are getting out of this karmic process altogether. We're checking out of time altogether. We're entering into our timeless identity, our absolutely pure existence as Satchidananda Vigraha. And this could, therefore, it can't be compared to anything. This is so many verses that confirm this. So we just have to be patient. We have to be determined. We have to have full faith, conviction. The word was used nishchaya earlier. And that's also there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Faith means to have firm conviction that by carrying out Krishna consciousness, all subsidiary duties are automatically taken care of. And the effects of those duties, we automatically attain. This is in Bhagavad Gita as well. Atyeti tat saravamidin viditva. We surpass all lesser processes. So we have to be just patient, determined. We have to actually follow tat tat karma prartanat. We have to avoid bad association. And once again, we have to seek superior association. In this way, satovrite also, we have to purify our existence materially. Means you have to lead a clean life, make money in honest ways, stay clean in your samskaras. That's called dharma or karma. It's important, according to Krishna in chapter 7, text 28. That also helps us to minimize the obstructions that will make it difficult to practice Krishna consciousness. When we have, what our minds have, rather, objections to the orders of the spiritual master, some more than others. Or when our senses are just so wild that it's difficult to control them, this helps. This helps us. That's why it's important. And I believe very strongly that's why Srila Prabhupada was really pushing on this point in his later years, especially in 1977. Prabhupada said, I have no regrets about leaving this world. But then he corrected himself and said, I have one regret. And they asked him, Abhiram, Prabhu, my godbrother, is it that you haven't finished the Srimad Bhagavatam? And Prabhupada said, no. It's that I have not yet established Varnashram Dharma within ISKCON. It's the remaining 50% of my mission. Because if you want to make it easier on yourself to practice bhakti yoga in purity, you have to start with a clean slate. If you start in the red, then obviously you're going to have to remove some deficiencies. When we were in college, I don't know how it works in India, but in the United States, you have to take foreign language classes. It's a requirement. And if you didn't take any foreign language classes when you were in lower education, high school, then it doesn't count. You have to remove deficiencies. You don't get credit for that foreign language class. You have to take the class, you have to pass the class, but you get no credit because you're just removing a deficiency. Then later on, you can take another class and maybe get credit for it. So that's what it is when we're impious, when we don't follow the regulative principles, when we do not have a pious mindset or an inclination to remain fixed in dharma, then it just constantly obstructs our endeavors at Krishna consciousness. That's therefore very important, Prabhupada felt. And evidently Krishna feels as well, judging by what he says in chapter 7. Okay?
Hare Krishna, Dhanavad Pranam. I have a question. Prabhuji, thank you for your wonderful class. Regarding just before the question you gave answer for that, like Sajatiya Stigna, in that we should have higher association than us. At the same time, we should see whether they are where we are able to take their association. So can you expand more on that? Because sometimes even if they are so advanced devotees, and if we may judge them, it may be cause offense to from our side. So what is that understanding?
What you're saying is that, as I understand it, what happens if I'm maybe too inauspicious to take proper advantage of the association? Is that what you're asking?
No, in the sense, those who are advanced devotees than me, I'm supposed to take their association.
Okay, there's so much echo on this microphone that it sounds like 3 or 4 of you are asking the same question at once.
Should I try again? Okay.
Yes, please.
I'm asking Satovariya and Sajatiya.
Yes.
Sajatiya means where we are supposed to think our thinking level, our like-minded, it should be like-minded. And if it is not like-minded, even advanced devotee, it will be difficult for us to associate with. So how to understand that? Means first I'm hearing this concept.
Okay. Well, it's pretty natural. We all gravitate towards people that we can relate with. And that's called Sajatiya association. People in the same category. Just like if we visit Mathura or Vrindavan, you can check into any hotel, that's okay. But they may ask you, well, why don't you just go and stay in your own ashram? Because these are ISKCON people. You're an ISKCON person. So it's like that. But even within ISKCON as well, if you're associating with those who are maybe engaged in very manual labor, and who are not so strict about controlling their speech, and who are not very regulated in their sadhana, they're devotees. They have some faith, and they're engaged to some degree in the process. But if your adhikar is more than that, and you associate with them, then it will not help you. On the other hand, if your adhikar is less, then also you cannot take advantage of the more advanced association, the Brahminical devotees. So it's a little bit like that. Sajatiya ashaya snigdha sadhu sangha swatovare. But what determines who is an advanced devotee? That is only the strength, or rather the depth, of one's personal faith. Faith has to be very deep. That's the point. This person believes in Krishna consciousness more than I. He has the demonstrable fruits of that faith. I want that. This association we should seek out. But it won't be easy unless there's some frame of reference, some scope of identification at the same time. Yeah, this person is also an engineer. I'm also an engineer. So we can relate, you see. Is that okay?
Of faith and depth of faith.
There was signal is dropped out
Okay.
somehow.
I can repeat again.
Okay.
I wanted to know the difference between the strength of faith and depth of faith, which you spoke a few minutes ago.
Right. Well, I mean, they're kind of synonymous. I'm just using different adjectives to try to illustrate. Deep faith means strong faith, really, stronger faith. Sudrita nishchaya.
Prabhu, I had a clarification from you. When I heard about this like-minded Sajatiya, I thought, for example, some devotees are scientific minded and they need logic, reason and everything, and they gravitate towards those who are working in that field. And there are some who are very fond of pastimes from Srimad Bhagavatam. And similarly, some are very inclined to Tika of the Acharya's Tika, they study. So we gravitate towards them. Is it a correct understanding?
I think so, because, jatiya, what does it mean? Just, the same category. That can be maybe by birth. Some people can interpret it like that. Sajatiya. He's a Brahmin, I'm also a Brahmin. Or, it can be more general. I don't think there's any limitation. It's not clear. I mean, I haven't checked what the commentaries on that particular shloka say recently, but I think it's deliberately left a little bit wide so that we can make the appropriate choices on our own. The point is that there has to be some way to relate to this devotee, otherwise it will not be natural to associate very closely. That's off the top of my head what I can say. I hope it's okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu, for your wonderful class. About this Gajendra Moksha Leela, I had one question. Like when Lord came to save Gajendra, when Gajendra offered that flower, so I heard somewhere that Lord was so hurried to save Gajendra that he forgot to take Garuda as Vahan. And he came directly and then Garuda came from behind. Just wanted to know any acharyas have commented if it's true or like.
I don't remember exactly, but I also vaguely recall a verse of that nature in Rupa Goswami's Pajavali. Whether it was Gajendra or someone else, that's the part I don't recall. But you can look it up in Pajavali.
We have one question which has come on the chat. What is the difference between Varnashram and Daivi Varnashram?
Oh, very good question. This is the topic of another lecture. Varnashram means the mundane system, which is also going on since time immemorial. I mean, in some sense, they're the same. There's no real difference. But the crucial the pivotal difference is that Daivi Varnashram Dharma means you're doing it for Krishna exclusively. In other words, everyone is a pure devotee. It's a same symbiotic system meant for lokasangraha, which we can translate loosely as social solidarity, but it's not mundane. It's not done for oneself, because as soon as you do Varnashram for yourself, it immediately morphs into the caste system. That is to say, it begins to morph into the caste system. And over time, it just gets more and more degraded. So now we see in society, in India in particular, actually you do have some Varnashram even in Southeast Asia. The king of Thailand has Brahmins as advisors. They call them that because Southeast Asia was once part of the Vedic civilization. But as soon as you try to exploit the Varnashram system for your own gratification, then immediately becomes just mundane. So what was once an elevating socio-religious system has now become a very debased, socioeconomic or political system. And, we find that that's alive and well here in South Asia, but it's totally mundane, exploitive, and causes a lot of suffering, especially if you live in Mithila and other such places. So real Varnashram actually means Daivi Varnashram. As Krishna says, Yad Karoshi, Yad Ashnasi, Yad Jahoshi, Dadasi Yat, Ityadi. Whatever you're doing, you do it for me. And if you are doing your own dharma, fine, but do it for me as an offering to me. That makes it Daivi Varnashram. So a lot of the mundane details, they may be also compromised according to Krishna's will, but that's a very touchy subject, very dangerous. We always have to work with absolute certainty under the directions of the spiritual master and the line of parampara acharyas and the shastras. Arjuna was able to fight at Kurukshetra. He was able to kill his relatives, but only because Krishna told him to do so. Otherwise, it would have been sinful. This is the point that we have to get. The principle of yukta vairagya that Rupa Goswami gives also can be severely abused if we're not very attentive on this other principle of Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatri Vidhim Vina Aikantiki Harer Bhaktir Utpataiva Kalpate. He says that so-called exclusive transcendental pure devotional service that is not in sync with what the Guru Sadhu Shastra says, especially Shastra, Shastriyonitvat, because gurus and sadhus, they only get their authority from Shastras, not otherwise. So then it just becomes a disturbance. So we have to be careful about that. I hope that's okay. Brief answer, big topic.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can I ask question?
Please.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. Very grateful to your enlightenment, Prabhuji, especially about the laxity and its dangers, and how intensely we should practice. My question
That's
is
Vishwanath
about,
Chakravarti Thakur's advice,
yeah,
not
yeah,
mine.
6.41. So yes, but the emphasis which you laid, it was very helping. My question is actually, what exactly is that laxity in effort? Can you please elaborate on that? And does it lead to offense? Because you quoted that, Bahu Janma Kara. So can you just throw some
Yeah.
light on this? This is one question, and one more question is there. For that.
Well, let's take one at a time.
Yes, yes.
So for your first question, I don't think that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur really elaborates on it in that purport. So, you can consult your dictionary. What does shitila mean? Shaitilia, same. What
Okay.
does it mean to be lax? Yetna, prayatna, to make an effort. You just, it's like someone came to Srila Prabhupada once and said, can you give me your mercy? I need your mercy to advance. Give me your blessings. And Prabhupada said, Ashirvad to hai, lekin, you have to do the work. So the mercy is already there in the form of the instruction, but we have to follow the instruction. We have to grab those words. Guru mukha padma vakya, chiteti koriya aikya, arana koriya homani asha. This is the key. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, yes. Laxity has directly to do with the execution of the order of spiritual master. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu.
I mean, how many orders are there in his books? Are we following all of them? Just consider.
Yeah.
Once in Los Angeles, they used to play lectures, Srila Prabhupada's lectures. And one day I noticed they were playing the same lecture that they had played the day before. So I mentioned it to my godbrother, Mayapur Shashi Prabhu, and he smiled and he said, have you memorized it yet? So this is the point. How many of the instructions are we following? You have to follow all of them. Prabhupada said, even the little ones, everything. That's what it means to take shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Okay, second question.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much. My second question is in regard to the question which was asked a little just before that about faith. You mentioned that there should be the depth and strength of the faith, and one should able to see the demonstrable fruits of the faith, and wanting to have those fruits so that we associate with such person. So what is this demonstrable fruits of faith? Are the post position, or the influence, or the fruits? What are these demonstrable fruits of faith actually?
Good
So that we
question.
can identify.
Sorry?
Yeah, so that we can identify and associate.
Yes. Vairagya vidya, jnanam chayarahaitakam. We hear from the first canto that a person who has developed pure devotional service, automatically he gets detachment and knowledge. That is the very nature of proper following of the process of bhakti. It is inseparable from that practice. Vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga. And we hear from Prahlad Maharaj in the fifth canto that when someone actually embraces the principle and the practice of pure devotional service, which he defines as ahaituki bhakti, koi hetu nahi, or nishkama bhakti. Those two adjectives are used in the commentaries on that verse. Swastiyastu, no, I'm sorry, yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana, sarvair gunais tetras samastate suraha. Then that person naturally displays all the qualities of the demigods, just like Srila Prabhupada. One of my god sisters was working very hard to scrub the bathroom floor in Srila Prabhupada's quarters. because there was a stain on the marble. So she was working very hard, and she was, just sweating and, clothes falling apart and just really working hard. Suddenly, Srila Prabhupada came back early. Usually they would clean his rooms when he was on his walk. So here she is in this condition, and she's on the floor, and suddenly the door opens, and she sees Srila Prabhupada. Such a shock. So she wanted to pay her obeisances. Before she could do so, Srila Prabhupada very humbly said, "May I come in?" This is what I'm talking about. This is what arrests us when we encounter a pure devotee. Uncommon qualifications, such humility and compassion, soft heart, fierce intelligence, hard arguments, all the qualities that the demigods have, they come when we practice pure devotional service, when we're really devotees. Then the demigods themselves come and stay within our hearts. Samasate. Asate means to sit, asan. Samasate means they come and they stay there. They don't leave, because the qualities of a devotee are not comparable to the qualities of the non-devotees. The non-devotees' qualities, they're just temporary results of his past activities. Demigods come as long as they're obliged. And then when the karma runs out, they clock out. We're done. They'd have no attachment. But when they see a devotee who's actually nishkama, ahaituki bhakti karehe, so then they think that we are all day long trying to administer the karma of these ingrates in the material world, who are just going to go back and do more nonsense as soon as their good karma runs out. We don't want to stay with this person. So as soon as the karma is done, they're gone. But with a devotee, they think, this person is special. We want his association. Therefore, they stay. And when the demigods stay in your heart, Sarvadeva Mayo Guruhu, then automatically all their good qualities will stay. This is the fruit of bhakti, ahaituki bhakti, pure devotion. Is that okay?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
I had a question, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Regarding, we were recently reading in Chaitanya Charitamrut, regarding when Lord Chaitanya is going in South India, he meets with Tattvavadis.
Yes.
Lord Chaitanya meets that time, he says, when he is asking what are your aspirations and what you follow, what is your abhidheya and what is your... So they say Varnashram Dharma and offering fruit to Krishna's Samarpanam and going to Vaikunta. So still the Lord Chaitanya there, he says, still that is also, he's not pleased with that. And then he quotes, of course, how bhakti is even developing love of God is the ultimate goal, not even going back to Godhead. So also the reference for third canto, where mana mat sevana jana, like 4 or 5 kinds of muktis are also not accepted by devotee if they don't have service. So I had a question regarding 2 questions. When we are talking about Devi Varnashram Dharma. So if that is the case, here also then they are following what Devi Varnashram Dharma only, because they are doing Krishna Samarpanam. So why Lord Chaitanya is rejecting, considering that is lower? And the second thing about the mukti, if somebody wants to go to spiritual world, so naturally want to do bhakti there, means he want to do service only there. So why that is also devotee don't want to ask?
I didn't get the second half of your question.
If the mukti means to stay in the Lord's loka, or to serve the Lord as a servant, so then what is the problem? Why devotee doesn't accept that? Because anyway he has to go there, he has to go do same thing there.
Yes. Okay. You bookmark the second half of the question. I will first deal with the first half of the question. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke with the Tattvavadis about Varnashram, and when, for that matter, he spoke with Ramananda Rai about the same, in both circumstances, he kind of dismissed it, not exactly dismissed it, but he denigrated it in the sense that this is not our ultimate goal, but it is an intermediate goal. That's one thing. Another thing is that the Tattvavadis, were they practicing Daivi Varnashram or ordinary Varnashram? I don't know the answer to that, but it's something to consider. We should consider. As far as their goal of mukti, Salokya mukti in particular, bhakti is above these things. It is above both karma and gyan. Karma means dharma, and gyan means mukti, ultimately. That is the fruit of each of those processes. So we have use for both of them. Although we say that devotional service, pure devotional service, is free from both karma and gyan, in a strange way, it consists of nothing but karma and gyan. Taken in the most generic definitions, karma just means activity, and gyan means awareness. Those things are both necessary in devotional service. So you can have transcendental karma and transcendental gyan. Divya Gyanam, Krishna mentions in chapter 4, or Janma Karma Chame Divyam, sorry. He mentions transcendental karma. Narottam Das Thakur is also praying, Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashita. So these things are valuable also, but only in pure devotional service, because our only interest is pure devotional service. Therefore, when the spiritual master orders, now you have to perform Varnashram Dharma, the devotees are very interested. At that point, they say no. They don't say, no, we're not interested in the order of the spiritual master because it deals with something mundane. That would be an offense. Rather, they take it, Brahmarpanam, Brahmavir, Brahmagno, Brahmanahuta, Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Sanadhina. Everything in Krishna consciousness is on the same transcendental platform. And certainly, the order of the spiritual master is never extrinsic. It's always, we read already, it's the active ingredient of your spiritual endeavors. So it is indispensable. Prabhupada saw that. We don't care why he gave the instructions. That's his business. Our business is only to obey. And how do we obey? Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadho. It's we focus and make our, just like in the 4th canto, we find that Prabhupada writes that if a disciple cannot carry out the order of the spiritual master, then he would rather die. At least die trying to execute the order. It's true. In many places in Prabhupada's books, he writes, you cannot perform Varnashram in Kali Yuga. To such has. Firpi, you cannot do anything else either, if you think about it. Can you chant your rounds perfectly? Can we follow the principles? Can we avoid offenses? Think about it carefully. Can you even remember to tie your shoes? Unless Paramatma gives you that ability. So we're not concerned about the relative value of whatever it is that we're engaging in Krishna consciousness. The point is that everything engaged in Krishna consciousness has absolute and total worth. Therefore, we're devoted. That's the meaning of devotion. Yasya prasadad bhagavad prasado. Whatever the spiritual master tells, you do that. Bas. And then you get his mercy and you get love of Godhead. Prema pum artho mahan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ne kaha ki eto bahya Chaitanya Charitamrita mein Varnashram ke bare mein na. So this idea that it's external, prasadam is also external. Who's not taking prasadam? Raise your hand. You have to engage with your senses. That is the definition of bhakti. Rishikena, Rishikesha Sevanam. It's external. So external doesn't necessarily mean it can be dismissed or it's negligible even. Certainly not that it's mundane, but it's external and that we should appreciate. So that's the first part of your question. Is it an adequate answer? Second part?
Second part regarding mukti, that there are four kind of mukti which Vaishnavas accept. At the same time, Kapil Dev says, how even if there is no service, then mukti is not accepted.
Yes.
So if somebody is going to spiritual world, anyway, he has service only, then he's going. Otherwise, where is the question of going to spiritual world and not having service? So how I understand this?
Yeah, the principle for the devotees, pure devotees, is that I can accept mukti if it's favorable for my service. I can accept hell if it's favorable for my service. So they don't really care. Again, it's the same principle. The relative value, the ordinary value that we calculate for things in this world, it's not a consideration for devotees. So if, what is that? Sargapa varga narakeshu api tulyartha darshana. Therefore they see everything. That is what it means to be transcendental. Otherwise, if you're partial to Svarga Loka, but you don't want hell, it means there's some attachment. Really detached person will accept whatever the Guru says, and he'll do it. Arjuna can kill, if Arjuna can engage in sinful activities to kill people, to kill his family members for Krishna's pleasure, then why can't a person in ISKCON engage in pious activities when ordered by the spiritual master? It's the same principle. So in either case, our goal is pure devotion only. And it may be pure devotion in Vaikuntha. It may be pure devotion with equal opulence to the Lord. It may be pure devotion in which we look just like the Lord. The different muktis are there. If they're favorable, then we're eager to accept. Otherwise, we don't care. This is detachment. And transcendence means detachment. This detachment. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhuji.
With regard to the Tattvavadis, Mahaprabhu's discussion, their conception seems to have been, as it's portrayed by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, that we perform this ordinary Varnashram Dharma, and then we go back to Godhead for liberation. But the emphasis is different for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He wants a very intense, pure love of Godhead. So, prema pumarthoman, that thing is above all these other processes, which even in the Shastras we find sometimes are minimized in some degree. That's why. For example, when Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Paritija, that's what he's talking about. Mundane, ephemeral, relatively pious but not ultimately valuable things. That thing you have to give up. Or the conception that your devotional service is in that category. That also you have to give up. So our principle, which Krishna repeats twice, manmanabhava, madbhakto, madhyaji, mam namaskuru ityadi. This is the thing, pure devotion. All right? I think it's time over now. I have time if you have time, but I'm just reminding you.
Hare Krishna. I have one question. While we are reading different Acharyas' commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam, so if we come across some kind of contradiction between two Acharyas' commentaries, then should we try to reconcile them or just leave as it is? Is it apparent contradiction or actually there is contradiction? Sometimes we come across.
Okay, good question. It's actually three questions in one. Should we try to reconcile them? Yes. Should we just acknowledge that sometimes acharyas disagree? Yes. Third one I don't remember, but the point is that you're going to find contradictions. Krishna consciousness is full of contradictions. That is necessary. That is necessarily the case, considering that the absolute truth is of this nature. Achintya bheda abheda tattva. So we shouldn't get so bent out of shape about it. You asked if they're contradictions or just apparent contradictions. Well, it's both for this reason. We don't really worry so much about it. But one thing we do worry about is, what did my guru say? What has Srila Prabhupada said? If we find an example that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says something different or apparently different than what Srila Prabhupada said, then we're going to go with what Srila Prabhupada said.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Radha Damodara, Radha Damodara, Radha Damodara, Radhe. Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar.